So, Miranda. You may be wondering, Atropos, why start with Miranda? Like, there's tens of other moons, there's 8 planets, there's a sun. Why Miranda? And honestly, can't tell you. But let's try and make the best out of this little rock. Let's start with the name. Miranda's an odd name for a moon. It's a relatively normal name for like a person. And that's because it is named after a person. Well, not a real person, per se, but a person from a play. Now you see, the Uranian moons back in the day, when their first 4 moons were discovered, Ariel, Umbriel, Titania and Oberon, they were all named after fairies. And this was the general theme. Lots of planets have themes for the names of their moons. For example, Saturns are all named after giants. But back when Miranda was discovered, this rule was broken. When Kuiper discovered the planet on the 16th of February 1948, he called it Miranda, named after the character from The Tempest, who wasn't a fairy. But oh well, naming conventions are neat, but they're not the be-all and end-all, I suppose. And so the rule changed slightly. It's now they have to be named after Shakespeare or Alexander Pope characters, so that all the previous moons were grandfathered in. Although in practice they're all named after Shakespeare characters. So far, after Ariel and Umbriel, only Belinda managed to be named after an Alexander Pope character. But, oh well. Now, our information on Miranda's somewhat scarce, and what we do know is quite mysterious, as so far we've only been able to see the planet once, seeing the side exposed to sunlight back when Voyager passed it, or Voyager 2 passed it, to be clear. But that side was the south side of the planet, which is odd. So let's get on to its orbital properties, which will help explain that. So as a human, probably, you are likely aware that the Earth spins along its axis, showing half its face to the sun for daytime and deep space for nighttime, equaling roughly 12 hours each, give or take a bit. You probably also know that the moon orbits the plane of the Earth, following a similar-ish path to the sun. So, surely it shouldn't be the south facing the sun from Miranda, but it is. This is due to its parent planet, Uranus, the first of the ice giants who, unlike all of her sister planets, and well, most large things in the solar system, seems to be at an absurd angle relative to the plane of her orbit, especially compared to the others. And this oddity extends to her moons as well, including Miranda, who formed from the disk of material also spinning around the planet as it formed. So, why is Uranus like this? Well, we don't know exactly, but we have our theories. Firstly, and most likely, an Earth-sized protoplanet collided with this protoplanetary Uranus and knocked its axial tilt to the extreme 83-degree angle. as we do more episodes of this series, this will become a trend. If there's something extremely strange about the planets, it's probably a big rock did it. There were a lot of big rocks, and big rocks can deliver any amount of force you need. So, who's to say it wasn't a big rock? Anyway, where were we? Miranda. Miranda is the innermost of the major Uranian moons, with a semi-major axis of 129,390 kilometers, and it orbits the planet every 34 hours. This makes it the closest major moon to their planet. As you might expect for it being so close to Uranus, it has been tidally locked with the planet, one face always towards the giant at all times. Another odd feature of its orbit is its unusual inclination, laying 4.323 degrees off of its plane, which at first doesn't sound that absurd. 4 degrees isn't much, we were just talking about 83. But when compared to its sister moons, which have between 0.02 and 0.125, it's pretty extreme. We, again, don't know exactly how this happened, but the current main theory is that Miranda and its sister Umbriel formed a 3-1 resonance, which tugged on the moon, causing this shift. For those unaware of what this means, I will give a brief explainer. We all know bodies with mass pull on each other by way of gravitation, so all the moons are pulling on each other as well. But as they are always at relatively random positions to each other, the effects of this pull mostly cancels out, or acts smoothly as a modification rather than as anything that influential. But during resonances, especially a 3-1-1, every 3 times Miranda completes an orbit around Uranus, Umbriel has completed exactly 1 orbit, meaning its relative position is no longer random. Well, pseudo-random. So, what this means is that that tug is no longer cancelled out as much by random other effects, which means it can start shifting and impacting the orbit. And as Miranda is the smaller of the 2 bodies, it will affect Miranda much more than its sister Umbriel. The same theorized event helps explain some of our next mysteries on Miranda. Its absurd topology. Look at her. She looks so, well, shriveled. We'll get on to why shortly, but let's look into these wrinkles first. Here we have the moon's 3 corona, Inverness, Arden, and Elsinore. These raised stretches of land are believed to be from comparatively warm water swelling up from the planet's depths and distorting the surface. This isn't unique to Miranda, perchance. Venus also has coronas, but even though they get a magnitude larger than those that we find on Miranda, Miranda is more than a magnitude smaller than Venus. Which means, compared to the size of the body, it's no contest. Next, these great scars we see lining Miranda's face. The Rupes. Giant networks of cliffs and gorges, some reaching 20 kilometers in depth, are clear to see all across it. The most magnificent of which being the Verona Rupes, stretching to where the moon is obscured by the complete darkness of the Terminator. And it likely extends far beyond this, up into the moon's northern hemisphere. But we don't know for sure because, well, this one image is the sum total of our surface imagery of Miranda. Back in 1986, Voyager 2 passed Miranda on its mission and captured the images so that we would composite into this. But Voyager, as its name suggested, kept voyaging deeper into space. And this brief meeting during a gravity assist was the only time man has seen Miranda up close. Of course, there have been proposals to return, see the totality, but budgets come before ambition. So, well, I'm sure someday we will see what lies beyond the Terminator. As of now, who's to say? Ah yeah, this is topology. Let's talk about craters. Now, a lot of this will be quite obvious, and I'll avoid repeating it in the future, but let's explain it here now. Firstly, note the side facing Uranus is less cratered than the side facing into space, which is expected. If an asteroid was coming from the side of Uranus, it would have to pass by Uranus, overcome its gravity, and end up hitting Miranda instead, which is less likely than coming in from the other direction. But it does happen still. With enough time, everything happens. Now, another thing to note is that we can use craters to date geological features. As new features form, they pave over craters, and with this paving over, we can see which features are newer and which are older by the relative density of craters on the body. Now, we can see that the corona are much younger than their surroundings, suggesting they formed comparatively recently. But why might this be? As we mentioned earlier, resonances. See, these resonances don't just sift the orbits, they dump energy into the planet by stretching it, disrupting its equilibrium and liberating potential energy into heat, which allows for this internal volcanism, where we see this swell of warm for Miranda water. But other bodies have this too, so why is Miranda so distinct? Well, it's because of Miranda's size. Miranda is small. Very small. Well, for a spherical celestial body, that is. Its mean radius sits at about 235.8 kilometers. So a diameter of about 471.6 kilometers, which is the length of Ireland from tip to tail. The island of Ireland, not the country also called Ireland, which is on the island of Ireland. Anyway, this is not a small distance, but for a major moon, it's tiny. Your moon has a mean radius of 1,737.4 kilometers. Titan comes in at a massive 2,574.73 kilometers. Even its smallest major Uranian sister, Ariel, has 578.9 kilometers. Its two closest bodies are Mimas and Enceladus, both moons of Saturn, and both very interesting bodies. But they come in at radiuses of 198.2 and 252.1 kilometers respectively, with Mimas being the smallest spherical body yet discovered. Smallest celestial body that is spherical still discovered. This context adds to just how extreme the topology of the moon is. a 20-kilometer cliff would be impressive on any planet. It trumps Mount 4 by wide margin, with Mount 4 topping in at 1.25 kilometers, which is the mightiest one Earth has, and compared to 20 kilometers, that's just a stepping stone. But that's 1.25 kilometers on a planet so much larger than tiny Miranda. 20 kilometers is a decent amount of the total depth of this Earth's moon. But similar to its size, it has a relatively small mass too, but if it didn't, that would raise quite a few questions. And Miranda already has enough questions for us to look into. It just has a nice 6.29 times 10 to the 19 kilograms, which is 2 magnitudes smaller than the Earth's ocean's mass. This, again, at first might sound impressive, but that's a tiny amount. The water on Earth only takes up 1/500th of its mass, its volume, even. Back to how we began. Why start with this tiny rock on a far-off planet to begin with? It's so small and rarely talked about. It was a whim, I suppose. Does there really have to be a reason? I saw a moon I know nothing of, and it had a name that is important to me. I said, why not learn a bit about this tiny little rock? And why not share that? Anyway. What an interesting rock Miranda turned out to be. It's an extreme we don't often think about. World of tiny giants. Thus, this tiny giant is interesting in their own special way. I think that is the beauty of Miranda, truly. Well, see you in the next entry, and perhaps suggest some other place for me to mull on down below in the comments. And feel free to subscribe if this relatively shoddy video didn't scare you off. Anyway, have a nice night.